Hey everybody, welcome back for another deep dive with us.
Yeah, glad to be back.
Today we're diving into, well, it might not seem like much, but it's actually a pretty big topic. We're diving into a single YouTube video.
All right.
And this video, the title of this video is Pastor Gino Jennings Explains How Jesus Christ is God, One God, Jesus Christ, Bible Study Worship.
Okay.
And it's uploaded by a channel. The name is a little long. It's Terrence Harvey Studios, Harvey.
Gotcha.
And this video explores something really interesting. It's about, the nature of God.
Yeah.
And, we often hear about the Trinity and how God exists as three persons. But Pastor Jennings, in this video, he really challenges that idea.
Uh-huh.
Have you ever wondered, how some Bible verses seem to contradict that whole Trinity concept?
Oh, for sure. There are a lot of verses that make you think twice.
Yeah, so that's what we're going to be looking at today. Pastor Jennings, he presents a different perspective.
Right.
Okay, so let's get into it. So Pastor Jennings, he believes in what he calls one God, Jesus Christ. And what he means by that is that there's only one God, not three distinct persons like the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
So it's a much more unified concept of God.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is how he uses the Bible to support this idea.
Yeah, what I find fascinating is how he doesn't just quote verses. He actually breaks them down word by word, using all these vivid analogies and even a bit of wordplay.
Yeah, it's like he's a detective, piecing together clues.
Exactly.
Yeah, and one example that really stuck with me was when he described how he chips away at the concept of the Trinity.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
He compares it to an old man whittling down a stick until there's nothing left but the core.
It's a great image. Very evocative.
Yeah, and then he asks this really thought-provoking question.
Okay, what's that?
If God is a spirit, then how can he be a person?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Right.
Yeah.
And he makes the argument that the person was Jesus in the flesh, and that God's spirit was within that person.
Interesting. So he's separating the physical form from the spiritual essence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, he really emphasizes that God doesn't have a physical body.
Right. That's a key point because it challenges the traditional image many people have of God.
And the way Pastor Jennings speaks, he's so passionate about it.
Yeah, he's definitely got a fiery delivery.
Yeah, he's always saying, did you hear me? Like he wants to make sure everyone understands.
He wants to drive that point home for sure.
For sure.
Yeah. It's clear that this isn't just some abstract theological concept for him. He really believes it.
Yeah, absolutely. And another analogy he uses is to describe the relationship between God the Father and God the Word.
Okay. How does he explain that?
He says that God is with himself by himself.
So he's implying a sense of unity rather than separateness.
Exactly. Yeah, he's saying they're not two different beings, but one and the same.
That's definitely a different way of looking at it.
Yeah, and it really makes you think about how we traditionally view the Trinity.
It challenges the idea of three distinct persons, doesn't it?
Yeah, and he doesn't shy away from addressing some of the tougher Bible passages that seem to support the Trinity.
Like which ones?
Well, he even talks about 1 John 5:7.
Oh, that's a big one. A lot of people point to that verse as evidence for the Trinity.
Right, exactly. But Pastor Jennings, he offers a different interpretation.
Okay, I'm curious to hear this.
He argues that the verse is actually referring to three titles of the one God.
So instead of three distinct persons, it's three different ways of describing the same God.
Yeah, that's his take on it. And he's pretty adamant about it, too.
So what does he say about the traditional view of the Trinity, then?
Well, he straight up calls it a lie from the depths of hell.
Wow, he doesn't hold back, does he?
Nope, he even calls it a European lie.
So he's associating it with something foreign, something outside of true biblical teaching.
Yeah, and he even pokes fun at people who study philosophy and Trinitarian trash.
Oh, that's got to ruffle some feathers.
Yeah, he definitely has a strong opinion on this.
It sounds like he's advocating for a simpler, more intuitive understanding of God.
Yeah, and one of his main points is that the idea of God needing help implies weakness.
And that contradicts the idea of an all-powerful God, right?
Exactly. He's saying if God is truly almighty, then he doesn't need anyone's assistance.
It's a logical argument for sure.
Yeah. And to really get people thinking, he uses a lot of rhetorical questions.
Like what kind of questions?
Like he'll ask, do you feel logical? Like he's challenging people to really examine their beliefs.
He's trying to engage the listener and make them an active participant in this theological discussion.
Exactly. He's not just preaching, he's sparking a debate.
And he doesn't shy away from making bold statements.
Oh yeah, like when he calls anyone who believes in a plural Godhead a heathen.
Wow, that's pretty strong language.
Yeah, it shows how deeply he believes in this idea of one God, Jesus Christ.
It's clear that this is a core principle of his faith.
Definitely. And he ends his argument by talking about the importance of unity.
Okay, how does he connect that to the idea of one God?
He basically says that not everyone has the knowledge of God's oneness.
So he's saying that this lack of understanding can lead to division.
Yeah, and he seems to be suggesting that if everyone recognized God as one, it would bring people together.
That's an interesting thought, for sure.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, it makes you wonder if some of the conflicts and disagreements we see in the world could be traced back to differing beliefs about God.
It's definitely something to think about. And, you know, if you've ever felt confused by all the different ideas about God out there,
Yeah.
then Pastor Jennings' message might resonate with you.
Yeah, it might offer a sense of clarity and simplicity.
Yeah, because he's presenting this very unified and straightforward view of God.
It's definitely an interesting perspective, and it challenges us to rethink some of our assumptions about the nature of God.
And that's what we're all about here on this deep dive, you know, exploring different ideas and expanding our understanding of the world.
Absolutely. The more perspectives we consider, the richer our understanding becomes.
Okay, so we're back, and I'm still kind of processing everything Pastor Jennings said about God being one.
Yeah. It's a lot to unpack, for sure.
It is, and you know what really stood out to me was how concerned he seemed about people who, you know, might be struggling with the whole Trinity thing.
Right, like it's too complex or confusing.
Yeah, exactly. And he seemed to be saying that this idea of one God, Jesus Christ, could be like a simpler way to understand God.
It's like he's offering a more straightforward path to faith.
Yeah, and he even went so far as to say that the Trinity is a European construct, not a biblical one.
Oh, yeah. I remember that he called it a European lie.
Yeah, it was pretty strong language.
It was definitely a provocative statement.
Yeah, and it made me think about, you know, how our understanding of faith can be influenced by culture and history.
Right, like maybe some of our beliefs aren't actually based on the Bible, but on traditions that have been passed down over time.
Yeah, and, you know, Pastor Jennings, he's all about going back to the Bible as the ultimate source of truth.
That's definitely a recurring theme in his message.
Yeah, and to support his point about God not needing help, he even brings up a specific verse from Isaiah.
Which one?
It's Isaiah 44:8, where God says, "Is there a God beside me? There is no God, I know not any."
Oh, right. So he's using God's own words to show that he's completely self-sufficient.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's interesting how he frames it as, you know, if you believe God needs help, then you're kind of diminishing his power.
Yeah, like it's almost an insult to God's majesty.
Yeah, exactly. And then there were all those rhetorical questions he kept asking.
Oh, yeah. He loves those, like, do you feel logical?
Yeah, exactly. He really wants people to think for themselves.
Yeah.
You know, not just blindly accept what they've been taught.
It's like he's challenging people to engage with their faith on a deeper level.
Yeah, and sometimes he even gets a little personal, you know, like when he talks about people who think God needs help creating the universe because it's too big of a job.
Right, he called those folks fools.
Yeah, he definitely doesn't hold back, and it's kind of funny in a way.
Yeah, it's like he's using humor to make a serious point.
Yeah, and then he brings up another Bible verse, 1 Corinthians 12:4-6.
Okay, what does that one say?
It talks about how God has different gifts, administrations, and operations, but it's all the same God working through them.
Oh, I see. So he's using that to show how God can manifest in different ways, but still be one?
Yeah, exactly. It's like he's saying there's unity within diversity.
That's a powerful concept for sure.
It is. And he even asks listeners if they've ever felt like they've encountered more than one God because of the different ways God seems to act.
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, because sometimes it can feel like God is working in contradictory ways.
Right. But Pastor Jennings is saying that even though God might express himself differently, the underlying reality is still oneness.
It's like he's offering a way to reconcile those seemingly conflicting experiences.
Yeah, to illustrate this point, he even brings up the baptism of Jesus.
Oh, okay. How does that fit in?
I mean, he talks about how God was present in 3 ways during that event.
Like as the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Exactly. But he's saying that these aren't 3 separate gods acting independently.
So it's more like 3 expressions of the same God.
Yeah, that's his interpretation. And he sees it as further evidence that God is one, even though he can manifest in different forms.
It's an interesting way of looking at that story, for sure.
It is. And it really makes you think about, you know, how we interpret these biblical events.
Right, because our interpretations can shape our entire understanding of God.
Yeah, and you know what's important to remember as we're listening to Pastor Jennings?
What's that?
Is that he's offering just one perspective.
Right. There are many different interpretations out there.
Yeah, and it's up to each of us to explore these different viewpoints and ultimately come to our own conclusions.
Absolutely. That's the beauty of faith. It's an ongoing journey of discovery.
Yeah, and Pastor Jennings is definitely giving us a lot to think about.
He is, for sure. And as we continue, I'm curious to see how he applies this idea of God's oneness to other theological issues.
Yeah, me too. Like, how does this impact our understanding of baptism or salvation?
Right, and how does he respond to those who hold different views?
Yeah, there's still so much to explore. Okay, we're back and ready for the last part of our deep dive into Pastor Jennings' message.
Yeah, there's still a lot to uncover.
There is. And, one thing that's been consistent throughout this whole video is how strongly he feels about this topic.
Yeah, his conviction is palpable.
It is. And, he really encourages people to question what they've been taught about God.
Yeah, like he doesn't want anyone just blindly accepting things.
Exactly. And there's this one part where he directly addresses those who might be struggling with the Trinity.
Oh, yeah. What does he say?
He says, you might as well come out of the Trinitarian church, come out of 3 separate and distinct personalities that work in unison with the one. You liar, ain't no Bible say that.
Wow. He really doesn't mince words, does he?
He doesn't. And it's clear that for him, this isn't just a matter of interpretation.
Right. It's a fundamental truth.
Yeah, and he immediately follows that up with another powerful statement.
What's that?
He says, who says when God need help?
Oh, right. He's emphasizing God's self-sufficiency again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like he's saying that even the idea of God needing help is a contradiction.
Because it goes against the very nature of who God is.
Exactly. And this is where he brings in his argument about the origins of the Trinity.
Yeah, he calls it a European lie.
Right. He traces it back to Rome, Italy, and he contrasts it with what he calls the heavenly truth of God's oneness.
So he's drawing a clear line between what he sees as true belief and false teaching.
Yeah, and he's not afraid to call people out.
Like when he says, anybody that pluralizes the Godhead are heathens.
Yeah, that's a pretty strong statement.
It is, and it shows just how seriously he takes this issue.
Yeah, it's like for him, this is the core of true faith.
Right, and even though his perspective might seem controversial to some, it's important to remember that he's coming from a place of deep conviction.
Yeah, he truly believes this is what the Bible teaches.
And you can hear that in his voice. He's not just reciting words, he's speaking from the heart.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes his message so compelling. Even if you don't agree with him, you can't deny his passion.
That's true, and regardless of our own personal beliefs, I think this video serves as a reminder that theological interpretations can vary widely.
Yeah, and it's up to each of us to explore these different perspectives and come to our own understanding of God.
Absolutely. And, maybe Pastor Jennings has inspired some of us to take a closer look at the Bible.
Yeah, and maybe even question some of the things we've always assumed to be true.
Exactly, because faith is an ongoing journey and there's always more to learn.
Yeah, and that's what we're all about here on The Deep Dive, exploring different ideas and expanding our understanding of the world.
Absolutely. And sometimes those explorations can lead us to unexpected places.
They can. And, even though we've come to the end of this particular deep dive, I hope it sparked some new thoughts and questions for you.
Me too. And I encourage everyone to keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.
Because that's how we grow and learn and deepen our understanding of faith and the world around us.
Absolutely. So until next time, keep diving deep.
Keep diving.